Good morning, I'm Jonathan Larsen with TYT Managing Editor Jonathan Larsen. I'm reporting this morning for TYT Investigates on the still unfolding scandal and crisis at the Department of Justice, where the Attorney General Bill Barr is in the process of removing the top federal prosecutor for the Southern District of New York. If you don't already, I'm going to have the details in just a second. If you don't already subscribe to our channel at TYT Investigates, I hope you'll do that and follow us for commentary like this on breaking news, as well as discussion of details of our original reporting, which we do for TYT. So let's get into what's happened now, today, and in the last 24 hours in the ongoing crisis in the Southern District of New York, which again, if you're not familiar with, is the district where probably even more so than Washington, D.C., the federal government, that's the tip of the spear for the federal government's investigations into Donald Trump and his associates. So yesterday, after Jeff Berman, the top federal prosecutor, the U.S. attorney for the Southern District, refused to step down, Attorney General Barr, this is Trump's attorney general, issued a letter saying, quote, "I was surprised and quite disappointed by the press statement you released last night. As we discussed, I wanted the opportunity to choose a distinguished New York lawyer, Jay Clayton, to nominate as United States Attorney, and was hoping for your cooperation to facilitate a smooth transition. Unfortunately, with your statement of last night, you have chosen public spectacle over public service. Because you have declared that you have no intention of resigning, I have asked the President to remove you as of today, and he has done so." We'll get back to that. Berman responded, "In light of Attorney General Barr's decision to respect the normal operation of law and have Deputy U.S. Attorney Audrey Strauss become acting U.S. Attorney, I will be leaving the U.S. Attorney's office for the Southern District of New York effective immediately." So Barr backed down on two things here. That's what led to Berman stepping down. Barr backed down on two things. One was in his initial statement Friday, which appears to have been a lie, he said that Berman was stepping down. In his new statement Saturday, Barr says that Trump has decided to fire you, which appears to be the only legal way, short of a court intervening, to remove a U.S. attorney, at least with the administration's approval. That's one way that Barr blinked in this showdown. The other is that Barr originally wanted Berman's interim replacement to be the New Jersey U.S. attorney, a guy named Craig Carpenito, who used to be Chris Christie's lawyer. Instead, now we've got Deputy U.S. Attorney Audrey Strauss, and the reason that's more in line with protocol is because she's the person just below Jeff Berman, which means it makes sense. That's a natural progression. That's a natural interim replacement, is to have the number two person. Here's where it gets a little spicy. Strauss is also the one with direct leadership of the very investigations that have been causing trouble for President Trump. Investigations into Giuliani, into Michael Cohen, into Jeffrey Epstein, right, the pedophile with whom Trump has been associated. Berman continues in his statement, "It has been the honor of a lifetime to serve as this district's U.S. attorney." And again, it's really hard to overstate just how important the Southern District of New York is in terms of federal law. It is pretty much considered the premier post as an active prosecutor. And the premier district. This is where precedent and history typically get made. And he says, "But I could leave the district in no better hands than Audrey's." That's Audrey Strauss, who will now be coming in. "She is the smartest, most principled, and effective lawyer with whom I have ever had the privilege of working. And I know that under her leadership, this office's unparalleled assistant U.S. attorneys, investigators, paralegals, and staff will continue to safeguard the Southern District's enduring tradition of integrity and independence." So it might be easy to miss, but what Berman is doing in fairly legalistic diplomatic language here is he's taking a massive public dump on the Department of Justice. To suggest that the Southern District's enduring tradition of integrity and independence need safeguarding is a huge slap in the face at the integrity of the Trump administration. So the other thing I want to mention, this is the delicious, uniquely Trumpian aspect of this, is that Barr says, because apparently he's incapable of putting out a release that that's free of something that's not immediately factually disproven. He says, remember in his letter yesterday, he wrote, "I have asked the president to remove you as of today, and he has done so." Well, in very short order, President Trump was asked about this and says he was not involved. And as a number of people pointed out on Twitter, what's so hilarious about this is that time and time again, when he was supposed to not be involved, because that would be seen as politicizing, and the process does not allow for presidential intervention at those points, he has been very free and open about saying, oh yeah, I said we got to kill that investigation. So time after time, he has said, yeah, I was totally involved. And it sort of feels as though people in the Justice Department have spent years telling him, please don't say you're involved. Please don't say you're involved. It's a big problem. It's a big problem. And finally he got the message on the exact day when the correct answer was, of course I took responsibility for this. And now, exactly when they didn't need him to, he said, I was not involved, because that's what I've been told to say. And it might very well be true. It could very well be that Barr came to him and said, hey, I need you to fire this guy. And Trump said, yeah, whatever, I don't care. Now, yesterday when I talked about this, actually, there's one thing I said this was a uniquely Trumpian aspect of this. It's really, really important to remember, or to know if you never knew this. Do not let any media tell you that this is unprecedented politicization of the federal law enforcement prosecutorial system. Bush has still got Trump beat. If you're not familiar with this, back during the Bush administration, they were trying to gin up voter suppression, right? They were trying to build public support for measures that would make it more difficult for black people, poor people, disenfranchised people to vote. How do you do that? You implement measures that you can portray as a response to and a remedy for a problem. For that to work, you need to establish that the problem is real. In this case, the problem would be voter fraud. So how do you establish that voter fraud is real? You get crimes on the record, right? So that you can say, well, hey, in Wichita, this case of voter fraud was uncovered. How do you do that? You tell your federal prosecutors, make it a priority. And more than half a dozen of Bush's own federal prosecutors said, I'm not doing that because it's BS, and I'm not going to warp the obligations of my job in order to fulfill this political agenda of yours. And they got fired for it. And this didn't come out until years later, until the election was over. So that was a much more well-executed, less bumbling, much more far-reaching incidents of politicizing the U.S. Attorney's Office. So don't let anyone say that this is crazy or unprecedented. The only thing crazy or unprecedented about it is the public incompetence, the ineptitude of their ability to pull it off. The House Judiciary Committee, again, the House is controlled by Democrats, announced that they're going to open an investigation. Pelosi has given it her backing, and she suggested that Barr's involvement, the role he played in getting rid of Berman, had, quote, base and improper motives. Again, I'm referring to Politico's reporting here. And as I mentioned yesterday, Jerry Nadler, the New York Democratic congressman who chairs the Judiciary Committee, he's got a hearing coming up on Wednesday, which is now going to involve this as well. His hearing was already scheduled with two other whistleblowers from the Justice Department talking about politicization there. In the Senate, which is controlled by Republicans, the ranking, meaning the top Democrat who doesn't control the banking committee, but he's the top Democrat on the banking committee, is Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown. He sent a letter Saturday evening to the guy Trump wants to replace Berman with ultimately, permanently. That's Jay Clayton, who currently runs the Securities and Exchange Commission, which essentially is the regulator for Wall Street. So you're going to take the guy who's been regulating Wall Street for Trump, and if you haven't seen a lot of headlines about prosecutions, that should tell you something. And yes, fair point, that was true under Obama as well. He's going to take the guy who has not been making enemies on Wall Street as the chief regulator of Wall Street, and he's going to make him the federal prosecutor whose jurisdiction literally includes the street named Wall Street. Brown wrote to Clayton and said, quote, "Your involvement in another attempt by this administration to obstruct justice will undermine the Securities and Exchange Commission and your position as chair." And then he asked Clayton, who has never prosecuted a case in his life, he asked Clayton whether he ever, as an attorney at Sullivan and Cromwell, because of course he used to be in private practice protecting and defending rich people, he asked whether Clayton, as a private attorney at Sullivan and Cromwell, had ever defended or worked for anyone now being investigated by the Southern District of New York. So that's pretty much the, that's right, there's one more political aspect to this. For Clayton to be confirmed, Democrats could potentially try to filibuster, but it's not likely that they would be able to muster the numbers to successfully block Clayton's appointment as Trump's man in the Southern District. But the Senate has a tradition where for federal prosecutors, for the U.S. attorneys, that's their official title, U.S. attorney for the whatever district. If the two senators from the state where that district is say no to that nominee, traditionally, the White House has honored that as a blue slip. In other words, if the White House says, I want to nominate this guy, this woman for this role, and both senators from that state say no, the White House won't even nominate that person. If the White House goes ahead with it anyway, the Senate, on both sides of the aisle, this is a bipartisan tradition, or has been, right, to the extent that any such thing still exists. The Senate has honored that. So even if a senator personally likes a nominee, if the two senators from the state where that nominee will serve object, the rest of the Senate is supposed to honor that blue slip. Lindsey Graham, who chairs the Judiciary Committee, which is the committee that would send this nomination to the full Senate, Lindsey Graham, South Carolina senator, Republican obviously, according to Politico, previously indicated that he would defer to the blue slip tradition. And that raises the question of, well, what do the two senators from New York think? And both Chuck Schumer, the Senate Democratic leader, and Kirsten Gillibrand, the junior senator from New York, both of them have said that Clayton should not be confirmed, if only because of this, the way it was handled, right? In theory, there's another world where Trump handled the politicization of this much more smoothly and effectively and ended up with Jay Clayton being confirmed along with Democratic votes. Of course, we'll never know because luckily for us, Trump's just not very good at this. All right, that's my update. I hope all that made sense. If you got questions about it, put them in the comments, let us know. And as I said at the beginning, if you're seeing this on the main channel, come on over to TYT Investigates Reports. That's our TYT Investigates YouTube channel. Subscribe to us there. You'll get commentary every day from myself and TYT Investigative Reporter T.Wat Chang. We're live every day at 11:30 a.m. weekdays with commentary, talking about our original reporting, all that good stuff. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope we'll see you again. Take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. Bye now.